The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as 23-year-old Daniel rushed down the hospital corridor, his sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. He was already 15 minutes late for his shift, and his supervisor had warned him last week about punctuality. One more late arrival and he might lose this job, the only thing keeping his family afloat after his father died 6 months ago. Daniel worked as a maintenance worker at St. Mary's Hospital, mostly cleaning floors and fixing broken equipment. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills. Well, some of them anyway. His mother's diabetes medication kept getting more expensive, and his younger sister needed braces. The weight of being the man of the house at 23 felt heavier with each passing day. As he turned the corner near the emergency department, Daniel's mind was spinning with numbers. The rent was due in 3 days. He had $200 in his account. The rent was $750. Maybe he could ask for an advance on his paycheck, though he'd already done that twice this year. Maybe his aunt could lend them some money again. Maybe. He almost didn't see the old man sitting on the bench. In fact, Daniel nearly walked right past him. The emergency waiting area was always full of people sitting, waiting, worrying. It was background noise in a hospital, like the beeping machines and overhead pages calling doctors to different floors. But something made Daniel glance to his left at the last second. The elderly man sat hunched over, his face buried in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. Even from several feet away, Daniel could see the man's whole body trembling. No one else seemed to notice him. A nurse walked by without looking. A couple argued quietly near the vending machines. Life went on around this man who seemed to be falling apart. Daniel stopped walking. His shift started in 10 minutes. He was already late. His supervisor was probably already annoyed, but something pulled at his chest, a feeling he couldn't ignore. His mother always said, God speaks through that small voice in your heart, the one that tells you to do the right thing, even when it's inconvenient. Taking a deep breath, Daniel walked over to the bench and sat down beside the stranger. The man didn't look up. He just kept his face in his hands, crying silently in a way that seemed like his heart was breaking into a million pieces. "Sir?" Daniel said softly. "Are you okay?" It was a stupid question. Obviously, the man wasn't okay. But Daniel didn't know what else to say. The old man slowly lifted his head, and Daniel saw a face marked by years of life, now streaked with tears. His eyes were red and swollen, and he looked at Daniel with an expression of pure devastation. "My daughter," the man whispered, his voice cracking. "She's in surgery. The doctors said she might not make it." Daniel felt his stomach drop. He knew that kind of fear. He'd felt it 6 months ago in this same hospital when the doctors told him and his mother that his father's heart attack was massive, that they'd done everything they could. He remembered sitting in a waiting room just like this one, feeling helpless and terrified. "I'm so sorry," Daniel said, and he meant it with everything in him. "What happened?" The man tried to speak but couldn't at first. He took several shaky breaths before the words came out. "Car accident. Some drunk driver ran a red light, hit her driver's side door. She's only 32. She has 2 little kids. What am I going to tell them if she doesn't—" His voice broke completely, and he started crying again. Daniel sat there, watching this stranger fall apart, and felt tears burning in his own eyes. He thought about his own father, about how quickly life can change. One moment you're fine, and the next moment everything you love is at risk of being taken away. He thought about his sister and mother at home, and how much it would destroy him if something happened to either of them. Without really planning it, without overthinking it, Daniel reached out and placed his hand on the old man's shoulder. "What's your name, sir?" "William," the man said through his tears. "William Chen." "I'm Daniel. Listen, William, I know this is scary. I know it feels like the world is ending right now, but I want you to know you're not alone here, okay?" William looked at Daniel with surprise, as if he'd forgotten that kindness existed in the world. You don't even know me. Doesn't matter, Daniel said simply. Nobody should go through something like this alone. They sat in silence for a moment. Hospital sounds filled the space around them, the distant wail of an ambulance, the ding of the elevator, the steady rhythm of life and death that never stops in a place like this. Daniel knew he should go to work. He checked his phone quickly. He was now 20 minutes late. But looking at William's face, he couldn't make himself stand up and walk away. His mother's voice echoed in his mind, something she'd said countless times growing up. When God puts someone in your path who needs help, you stop. You don't keep walking. You stop. Daniel took a breath and asked something he rarely did, especially not in public with strangers. William, would it be okay if I prayed with you? William looked startled. They were sitting in a busy hospital corridor, people walking past them constantly. It wasn't a church or a quiet room. It was public and exposed and not at all the kind of place people usually pray out loud. But William's eyes filled with fresh tears, and he nodded his head. Please, he whispered. I'd like that. Daniel reached out and took William's hand. It felt strange at first. Holding a stranger's hand in the middle of a hospital hallway. William's hand was old and weathered, the skin thin and spotted with age. But Daniel held it firmly, trying to pass some strength from his young hands to these older ones that were shaking with fear. He closed his eyes and started to pray. Not the formal prayers he'd memorized in Sunday school as a kid, but real words straight from his heart. He prayed for William's daughter, for the surgeons working on her, for her 2 children waiting somewhere to hear if their mother would survive. He prayed for William's peace and strength. He prayed for healing and hope and mercy. As Daniel prayed, something strange happened. He felt the words coming easier than they ever had before, like they were being given to him rather than something he was making up. And William's grip on his hand got tighter, holding on like Daniel was an anchor keeping him from drowning in fear. When Daniel finally said amen and opened his eyes, he saw that several people in the waiting area were watching them. A nurse had stopped in the hallway. An older woman near the vending machines had tears on her cheeks. But Daniel didn't feel embarrassed. He just felt like he'd done exactly what he was supposed to do. Thank you, William said, his voice stronger now. I can't tell you what that means to me. I've been sitting here feeling so alone and so scared, and then you stopped. You didn't have to do that. Daniel squeezed William's hand one more time before letting go. Yes, I did have to. Some things are more important than being on time for work. As he said it, Daniel realized he meant it completely. His supervisor might be angry, he might even get written up, but sitting here with William, praying with him, offering comfort in his darkest moment, that mattered more than punching a time clock. Is there anything else I can do? Daniel asked. Can I get you some coffee or something to eat? William shook his head. You've already done more than you know, but could I have your phone number? In case I need someone to talk to or to pray with again? Daniel didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone and they exchanged numbers. Then he stood up, knowing he really did need to get to work now. But before he walked away, he looked William in the eyes and said something that surprised even himself. You call me anytime, day or night. If you need prayer, if you need to talk, if you just need to know someone cares, you call me. I mean that. William nodded, unable to speak, his eyes full of gratitude and something else. Hope, maybe. Or at least a little less despair than before. As Daniel finally hurried toward the maintenance office, he had no idea that those 15 minutes would change everything. He didn't know that the old man whose hand he'd held was anything other than a worried father. He didn't know that simple act of stopping, of caring, of praying with a stranger would set in motion a series of events that would transform his entire life. All he knew was that he'd done the right thing. And sometimes, that's all that matters. Daniel's supervisor was waiting for him when he finally made it to the maintenance office. Mr. Harrison stood there with his arms crossed, looking at his watch with that expression Daniel had come to dread. The one that said he was disappointed but not surprised. 25 minutes late, Daniel. That's the third time this month. Daniel opened his mouth to explain, to tell him about William and the prayer and how someone needed help, but he stopped himself. Mr. Harrison was a good man, but he had a department to run and rules to follow. Excuses were excuses, even good ones. I'm sorry, sir. It won't happen again. Mr. Harrison studied Daniel's face for a long moment, and something in his expression softened just a bit. Look, kid, I know things have been hard since your dad passed, but I can't keep making exceptions. Next time, I'll have to write you up officially. You understand? Yes, sir. I understand. The rest of Daniel's shift dragged by slowly. He mopped floors and fixed a broken wheelchair and replaced light bulbs in the pediatric wing. Normal work, the kind that usually kept his hands busy while his mind wandered. But today, he kept thinking about William, wondering if his daughter had made it through surgery, wondering if he'd ever hear from the old man again. He got his answer at 2 in the afternoon, right as he was emptying trash cans on the 3rd floor. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number. Hello? Daniel, this is William. William Chen, from this morning. Daniel's heart jumped. William, yes. How is she? How's your daughter? There was a pause on the other end, and for a terrible moment, Daniel thought the worst. Then William's voice came through, shaky but lighter than before. She made it through surgery. She's in recovery now. The doctors say the next 48 hours are critical, but she's alive. She's still with us. Daniel found himself grinning, standing there in a hospital hallway with a trash bag in his hand, smiling like he'd just won the lottery. That's wonderful news. I'm so glad, William. I really am. I wanted to thank you again, William said, for stopping this morning, for praying with me. I've been thinking about it all day. You gave me hope when I had none left. They talked for a few more minutes before Daniel had to get back to work. But as he hung up, he felt something warm in his chest, like he'd been part of something that mattered, something bigger than mopping floors and taking out trash. That wasn't the last call Daniel got from William, not by a long shot. The next day, around noon, his phone rang again. William wanted an update from the doctors, and he was scared. His daughter had developed a fever, and they were worried about infection. So Daniel stepped outside during his lunch break, sat on a bench in the hospital courtyard, and prayed with William over the phone. Just the two of them, connected by distance, but joined in hope. On the 3rd day, William called in the evening, after Daniel had gone home. His daughter had taken a turn for the worse. Her vitals were unstable. The grandkids were asking questions he didn't know how to answer. William sounded exhausted, worn down by days of worry and sleepless nights in hospital chairs. Daniel was eating dinner with his mother and sister when the call came. He excused himself and went to his small bedroom, sitting on the edge of his bed while William poured out his fears on the other end of the line. Daniel listened and encouraged and prayed. His dinner got cold, but he didn't care. His mother knocked softly on his door after he hung up. Everything okay, honey? Daniel told her the whole story. About William, about the prayer in the hospital corridor, about the calls over the past few days. His mother listened with tears in her eyes, the kind she got when she was proud of him. Your father would be so proud of you, she said, squeezing his shoulder. You're being the kind of man he raised you to be. On the 4th day, Daniel was scrubbing graffiti off a bathroom wall when his phone rang. He almost didn't answer because his hands were covered in cleaning solution, but something made him strip off his gloves and pick up. Daniel! William's voice was completely different this time. Bright, alive, full of joy. She's awake. My daughter opened her eyes this morning. She recognized me. She asked about her kids. The doctors say she's going to make it." Daniel felt tears spring to his eyes right there in the hospital bathroom. "William, that's amazing. That's such good news." "I need to see you," William said. "I need to thank you properly, face to face. Can we meet? Maybe at the hospital cafeteria during your lunch break?" They met the next day at noon. Daniel spotted William sitting at a corner table, looking completely different from the broken man on the bench 5 days ago. He stood when Daniel approached, and to Daniel's surprise, he pulled him into a tight hug. "Thank you," William said simply. "Thank you for stopping." "Thank you for caring about a stranger." They sat down with coffee, and William asked about Daniel's life, where he was from, how long he'd worked at the hospital, what his plans were for the future. Daniel found himself opening up in ways he usually didn't with people he barely knew. He talked about his father's death, about supporting his mother and sister, about how he'd had to drop out of community college because they needed his income more than they needed him to have a degree. "I had dreams once," Daniel admitted, stirring his coffee without drinking it. "Wanted to be a social worker, help people going through hard times. But life had other plans, you know? Now I'm just trying to keep us afloat day by day." William listened with an intensity that made Daniel feel like his words actually mattered. When Daniel finished talking, William was quiet for a moment, just watching him with thoughtful eyes. "Can I tell you something, Daniel? Something I haven't told many people?" Daniel nodded. "I built my company from nothing. Started in my garage 30 years ago with an idea and $5,000 borrowed from my father-in-law. Now Chen Technologies employs over 3,000 people across 6 states. I've made more money than I ever dreamed possible. I've won awards, been on magazine covers, spoken at conferences around the world." Daniel wasn't sure where this was going, but he stayed quiet and listened. "And you know what? In 30 years of success, I've met thousands of people. Business partners, investors, employees, competitors, smart people, talented people, ambitious people. But 5 days ago, when my world was falling apart, when I needed someone most, not one of those thousands of successful people was there." "You know who was there?" Daniel felt his throat get tight. "A 23-year-old maintenance worker who was late for his shift," William said, his eyes shining. "A young man who had every reason to keep walking but chose to stop instead. You have something that can't be taught in business schools or learned from books. You have compassion. You have heart. And that, Daniel, is worth more than all the degrees and experience in the world." Daniel didn't know what to say. He just sat there, holding his coffee cup, feeling like this conversation was heading somewhere he couldn't quite see yet. William leaned forward. "I've been thinking about something for the past few days. My daughter's accident made me realize how short life is, how quickly things can change. It made me want to do something meaningful with the resources I've been blessed with. I'm starting a foundation, Daniel, a charitable organization to help families going through medical crises just like mine. Families who can't afford the bills, who don't know how to navigate the system, who just need someone to care." "That sounds wonderful," Daniel said, meaning it completely. "I want you to be part of it," William said. "I want you to help me run it." Daniel blinked. Sure, he'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "I'm offering you a job, Daniel, community outreach coordinator for the foundation. You'd work with families, connect with them during their hardest moments, help them access the resources they need. It's exactly what you said you wanted to do. Help people going through hard times." Daniel's mind was spinning. "William, I don't have any qualifications. I didn't finish college. I've never worked in an office. I'm just a maintenance guy who mops floors." "You had the qualification that mattered most when I needed it," William said firmly. "You stopped. You cared. You knew exactly what to say and do because you've lived through loss yourself. That's not something you can get from a degree. But I don't know anything about running a foundation or working with charities or—" William held up his hand. You'll learn. I'll teach you. We'll get you enrolled in some business courses. Help you finish that degree if you want it. But Daniel, I'm not looking for someone who knows how to do this job already. I'm looking for someone who has the heart to do it right. And that's you. Daniel felt like he couldn't breathe. This was crazy. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. Maintenance workers didn't get offered positions at foundations. Poor kids from rough neighborhoods didn't get mentored by millionaire CEOs. This was the kind of story you saw in movies, not real life. Can I think about it? Daniel asked, his voice barely a whisper. William smiled, a real smile that lit up his whole face. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Daniel, I want you to know something. I believe God put you in that hallway 5 days ago for a reason. Maybe it was to help me, but maybe it was also to help you, to open a door you didn't even know existed. That night, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with his mother after his sister had gone to bed. He told her everything about the lunch meeting, about William's offer, about the opportunity that seemed too good to be true. His mother cried, but they were happy tears this time. She took Daniel's hands in hers and looked him straight in the eyes. Baby, I've been praying for a breakthrough for our family since your father died, praying for something good to come out of all this pain, and now here it is, standing right in front of you. This is your moment, Daniel. This is God answering our prayers. But what if I fail? Daniel asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at him all afternoon. What if I'm not good enough? What if I embarrass myself and let William down? Then you fail, his mother said simply. But at least you'll fail trying to do something meaningful instead of playing it safe and wondering what if for the rest of your life. Your daddy didn't raise you to be afraid of challenges. He raised you to face them head on. Daniel looked at his mother, really looked at her. She'd aged so much in the past 6 months, worry lines deepening around her eyes, gray appearing in her hair. She worked 2 jobs to help make ends meet, never complained, never stopped believing that better days were coming. Okay, Daniel said, feeling a mix of terror and excitement rising in his chest. Okay, I'll do it. I'll call William tomorrow and tell him yes. His mother squeezed his hands tight and smiled through her tears. That's my boy. That's my brave, beautiful boy. As Daniel lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, he thought about that moment 5 days ago when he'd almost walked past William, almost kept going to his shift. Too focused on his own problems to notice someone else's pain. His whole life had turned on that single decision to stop, to care, to reach out to a stranger in need. And now, everything was about to change. Daniel's first day at the foundation felt like stepping into a different world. He'd traded his maintenance uniform for clothes his mother helped him pick out at a discount store, dress pants, and a button-up shirt that felt stiff and uncomfortable. He stood in front of the office building downtown, a sleek glass structure that reflected the morning sun, and almost turned around 3 times before finally walking through the doors. The office itself was nothing like he'd imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, people in expensive suits talking on phones and tapping away at computers. Daniel felt like an imposter. Like someone had made a mistake letting him in here. He clutched his old backpack, the same one he'd carried in high school, and tried not to look as terrified as he felt. William met him in the lobby with a warm handshake and genuine smile. Ready for your first day? Honestly, I'm scared to death, Daniel admitted. William laughed, not mockingly but with understanding. Good. That means you care about doing it right. Come on, let me show you around. The foundation occupied the entire 10th floor. William had named it the Hope Foundation, simple and direct, focused on helping families facing medical emergencies. There were only 5 employees so far, including Daniel. Everyone else had years of experience in nonprofit work or healthcare administration. And then there was Daniel, who until 2 weeks ago had been scrubbing toilets and mopping floors. His desk sat in a corner office with a view of the city. A desk. An actual desk with his name on a placard. Daniel Chen, Community Outreach Coordinator. He touched the nameplate, half expecting it to disappear like a dream. "You okay?" William asked, noticing Daniel's stunned expression. "I just never thought I'd have a desk with my name on it," Daniel said quietly. "My dad worked construction his whole life, never had an office, never wore a tie, and here I am." "Your father would be proud," William said firmly. "Now come on, we've got work to do." The first few weeks were overwhelming. Daniel attended meetings where people used words he didn't understand: strategic initiatives, stakeholder engagement, outcome metrics. He'd nod along, taking notes, then spend his evenings Googling terms and trying to catch up. The other employees were kind but clearly skeptical. They'd exchange glances when he asked basic questions or didn't know how to use certain computer programs. One afternoon, during a meeting about grant applications, Daniel completely lost track of the conversation. The finance director was explaining budget allocations and ROI projections, and Daniel just sat there feeling stupid and out of place. When the meeting ended, he stayed in the conference room, staring at his notes that might as well have been written in another language. William found him there 20 minutes later. "Rough meeting?" "I don't belong here," Daniel said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "These people, they went to college. They have degrees and experience. I'm just fooling everyone, including myself. Maybe this was a mistake." William pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. "Can I tell you something? When I started my company, I didn't know anything about business either. I was an engineer who was good at writing code. That's it. I didn't know how to read a balance sheet or manage employees or negotiate contracts. I felt like a fraud every single day for the first year." "Really?" Daniel looked up, surprised. "Really? But you know what I learned? Nobody knows everything when they start something new. The people in that meeting who seemed so confident, they were all beginners once too. The difference between success and failure isn't what you know on day one. It's whether you're willing to learn and grow." William stood up and walked to the whiteboard in the conference room. He drew a simple diagram, two paths diverging. "You can quit now, go back to what's comfortable and safe. Nobody would blame you. Or you can push through the discomfort, ask questions even when you feel stupid, and learn. But here's the thing, Daniel. I didn't hire you because you know how to read financial reports. I hired you because you have something these other employees don't. You have the ability to connect with people when they're falling apart. That can't be taught." Daniel thought about William's words for a long time that night. The next morning, he came in early and found the finance director, a woman named Helen who'd been working in nonprofits for 15 years. "Helen, can I ask you something? And please be honest. Do you think I'm qualified for this job?" Helen studied him for a moment, then surprised him with her answer. "Honestly? No, not in the traditional sense, but I've been watching you, Daniel. When you talk about helping families, your whole face lights up. You genuinely care in a way that's rare. So here's what I'm thinking. How about we have lunch once a week and I'll teach you everything I know about nonprofit finance? If you're willing to learn, I'm willing to teach." That lunch turned into a regular thing. Helen became Daniel's mentor for the business side of the foundation. William took him to meetings with hospital administrators and taught him how to build partnerships. Another employee, Patrick, showed him how to navigate the complex world of insurance and medical billing. Slowly, piece by piece, Daniel started to understand how everything fit together. But the real transformation happened when the foundation took on its first family. Her name was Beverly, a single mother of 3, whose youngest son had been diagnosed with leukemia. She'd lost her job because of all the time off for his treatments, and she was drowning in medical bills. The hospital social worker referred her to the Hope Foundation, and Daniel's job was to meet with her and assess what help she needed. He met Beverly in the hospital cafeteria, the same one where William had offered him this job weeks earlier. She looked exhausted, wearing the same clothes she'd probably slept in, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Daniel recognized that look, the weight of impossible choices and crushing fear. He'd seen it on his mother's face when his father was dying. "I don't know why I'm here," Beverly said, her voice flat with defeat. "I've applied for assistance everywhere. Nobody can help us. The bills just keep coming, and I don't have anything left to give." Daniel didn't pull out forms or start asking official questions. Instead, he just listened. He let Beverly talk about her son, about the diagnosis, about losing her job, about the guilt she felt for not being able to protect her other kids from this nightmare. He listened the way he'd wished someone had listened to his mother 6 months ago. When she finally finished talking, her eyes red from crying, Daniel said something that surprised even himself. "Beverly, I'm going to help you, not because it's my job, but because I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning. My dad died 6 months ago, and I watched my mom try to hold everything together while falling apart inside. So I get it, and I promise you, we're going to figure this out together." Something shifted in Beverly's face. Hope, maybe, or at least a little less despair. Over the next week, Daniel worked harder than he'd ever worked in his life. He coordinated with the hospital to reduce Beverly's bills. He connected her with an employment program for parents of sick children. He arranged for the foundation to cover 3 months of her rent and utilities. He even found a volunteer who could drive her other kids to school while she stayed at the hospital. When he presented the complete assistance package to Beverly, she broke down crying in his office. "How? How did you do all this?" "Because you needed help," Daniel said simply, "and that's what we're here for." Word spread quickly. Beverly told other families in the oncology ward. Those families told their friends. Within 2 months, Daniel was working with 15 families, and the foundation's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Each family had different needs, different struggles, but Daniel approached every single one the same way. He listened first, helped second, and treated everyone with dignity and respect. William watched this transformation with quiet pride. One evening, as Daniel was getting ready to leave the office around 7, William stopped by his desk. "You're putting in long hours," William observed. "There are so many people who need help," Daniel said, looking at the stack of files on his desk. Each one represented a family in crisis, a story of struggle and hope. "How do I ever say no?" "You learn to take care of yourself, too," William said gently. "You can't pour from an empty cup, Daniel. But I have to tell you, watching you work with these families, seeing how you connect with them, I knew I made the right choice hiring you." 3 months into the job, a local news reporter heard about the Hope Foundation and wanted to do a story. Daniel tried to say no, insisting he was just doing his job, but William convinced him that sharing their story might help more families learn about their services. The interview was awkward at first. Daniel stumbled over his words, nervous in front of the camera. But when the reporter asked him why he did this work, something shifted. He forgot about the camera and just spoke from his heart. 6 months ago, I was a maintenance worker at St. Mary's Hospital, just trying to make enough money to support my family after my dad died. Then one day, I saw a man sitting alone in the hospital, completely falling apart because his daughter was in surgery. I almost walked past him. I was late for work, stressed about bills, focused on my own problems. But something made me stop. I sat down, held his hand, and prayed with him. That man turned out to be William Chen, and he changed my life by giving me this opportunity. But the real lesson wasn't about the job or the opportunity. It was about the power of stopping, of caring about someone else even when it's inconvenient. Every family I work with now, I see that same pain and fear I saw in William's eyes. And I get to be the person who stops, who cares, who helps. That's not a job. That's a blessing. The story aired on the local evening news. Daniel didn't think much of it until his phone started buzzing with messages from old friends and family members who'd seen it. His mother called crying happy tears. His sister texted saying everyone at her school was talking about him. Mr. Harrison, his old supervisor from the hospital, sent a message saying he always knew Daniel was meant for bigger things. But the real impact came the next morning when Daniel arrived at the office. The phone lines were jammed. Donations were pouring in from people who'd seen the news story and wanted to support the foundation's work. More families were calling for help, but more importantly, volunteers were calling asking how they could get involved. William found Daniel at his desk, staring at his computer screen in shock at the flood of emails and messages. "Still think you don't belong here?" William asked with a knowing smile. Daniel shook his head, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, he managed, "I'm starting to think maybe I do." "You more than belong, Daniel. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. Now come on, we've got families to help." As Daniel dove into the work that day, fielding calls and coordinating assistance, he realized something profound. He wasn't pretending anymore. He wasn't an imposter in a world where he didn't belong. He'd found his place, his purpose, the thing he was meant to do with his life. And it had all started with one simple choice to stop and help a stranger in need. 1 year after that life-changing prayer in the hospital corridor, Daniel stood in front of a mirror adjusting his tie. A real tie, the kind he'd learned to knot properly after watching YouTube videos late at night. He was getting ready for the Hope Foundation's first annual fundraising dinner, and his stomach was doing backflips. "You look so handsome," his mother said from the doorway of his bedroom. She was wearing a new dress he'd bought her, the first new clothes she'd had in years. "Your father would be beside himself with pride right now." Daniel turned to face her, and he saw tears in her eyes. Good tears, the kind that came from joy instead of pain. Over the past year, so much had changed for their family. Daniel's salary had allowed them to move into a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. His sister had gotten those braces she needed. His mother had been able to cut back to 1 job instead of 2. The weight that had pressed down on all of them for so long had finally lifted. "Mom, stop. You're going to make me cry too," Daniel said, pulling her into a hug. "And I need to keep it together tonight." The fundraising dinner was being held at the Grand Hotel downtown, a place Daniel had only seen from the outside before. Now he was walking through its marble lobby in a suit, shaking hands with donors and community leaders who'd paid $200 a plate to support the foundation's work. William found him near the entrance, looking slightly panicked. "Breathe, Daniel. You've spoken to hundreds of families in crisis over the past year. This is no different." "This is completely different," Daniel whispered back. "Those families needed help. These people are here to judge whether we deserve their money." "No," William corrected gently. "These people are here because they saw your interview on the news or they heard about the work we're doing and they want to be part of something meaningful. You're not asking them for anything. You're giving them an opportunity to make a difference." The dinner began, and Daniel tried to eat the fancy food on his plate without embarrassing himself. He wasn't sure what half of it was, but he smiled and nodded and made polite conversation with the people at his table. They asked him questions about the foundation, about the families he'd helped, and he found himself relaxing as he told their stories. After dinner, William stood at the podium to address the crowd. He talked about the foundation's first year, the 47 families they'd helped, the hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical debt they'd helped eliminate or reduce. He talked about partnerships they'd built with hospitals and social service agencies. And then he called Daniel up to the stage. Daniel's legs felt shaky as he walked to the podium. 200 people stared at him, waiting to hear what he had to say. He pulled out the speech he'd written and rewritten a dozen times, but when he looked down at the words, they suddenly felt wrong. Too formal, too scripted. Not him. So he put the paper down and just spoke from his heart. A year ago, I was mopping floors at St. Mary's Hospital for $11 an hour. I was late for my shift, worried about bills, stressed about taking care of my family. And I saw a man sitting on a bench crying. I almost walked past him. I had every reason to keep going, to focus on my own problems. But something told me to stop. The room was completely silent now. Daniel could see people leaning forward, listening. That decision to stop, to sit down with a stranger and pray with him, changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. But here's what I've learned over this past year. It's not just my life that changed. Every time we help a family, every time we sit with someone in their darkest moment and tell them they're not alone, we're creating a ripple effect. Those families go on to help others. They pay it forward in ways big and small. And it all starts with one simple choice: to stop and care when it would be easier to keep walking. Daniel paused, looking out at the crowd. This past year, I've met single mothers working 3 jobs to pay for their kids' cancer treatments. I've met elderly couples choosing between medication and groceries. I've met teenagers trying to care for sick parents while finishing high school. And every single one of them taught me something important. We're all one bad day, one accident, one diagnosis away from needing help. And when that day comes, the thing that matters most isn't how much money we have or what kind of insurance we carry. It's whether someone will stop, whether someone will care, whether someone will say, "You're not alone, we're going to get through this together." By the time Daniel finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. People stood and applauded, not politely, but with genuine emotion. After the dinner, Daniel was surrounded by donors wanting to talk, to share their own stories, to write bigger checks than they'd planned. One woman grabbed his hand, tears streaming down her face. "My husband died last year from a heart attack. We had good insurance, but the bills still almost destroyed us. I wish something like your foundation had existed then. Here." She pressed a check into his hand. "Use this to help someone who's where I was." Daniel looked at the check. $10,000. He'd never held a check for that amount in his life. "Ma'am, this is too generous. I can't—" "Yes, you can," she said firmly. "And you will, because that's what you do. You help people when they need it most." The fundraising dinner raised over $300,000 for the foundation. But more than the money, it created momentum. A local business owner who attended the dinner offered to match all donations for the next month. A hospital administrator approached William about expanding the program to 3 more hospitals. A university professor asked if she could create an internship program, bringing social work students to learn from Daniel's approach. 2 months after the dinner, William called Daniel into his office. "Sit down. We need to talk about something." Daniel's stomach dropped. Those words never meant anything good. "Did I do something wrong?" William laughed. "The opposite, actually. Daniel, the foundation is growing faster than I ever expected. We're getting requests from hospitals in other cities wanting to replicate our model. I think it's time we expand beyond just our state." "That's incredible," Daniel said, relief flooding through him. "It is. But it means we need to grow the team significantly. We need to hire more outreach coordinators, people who can do what you do, connect with families, help them navigate the system, treat them with dignity and compassion." William paused. "I want you to lead that effort. I want to promote you to Director of Community Outreach. You'd be responsible for hiring and training the new coordinators, developing our programs, and honestly, Daniel, shaping the heart of what this foundation is." Daniel sat there, stunned. "William, I've only been doing this for a year. There are people with way more experience." "Stop!" William held up his hand. "We've been through this before. Experience doesn't matter if someone doesn't have the heart for this work. You understand what these families are going through because you've lived it. You connect with them because you see them as people, not cases or numbers. That's what I need in a leader. That's what these families deserve." I don't know what to say, Daniel admitted. Say yes. Say you'll help me build something that can help thousands of families instead of dozens. Say you'll teach others what you've learned this year. Daniel thought about Beverly, the first family he'd helped, whose son was now in remission. He thought about the elderly man who'd lost his wife, but told Daniel that the foundation's support helped him find the will to keep going. He thought about the teenager who'd been able to stay in school because they'd helped with his mother's medical bills. Every face, every story, every life touched by this work. Yes, Daniel said. Absolutely, yes. The next few months were a whirlwind. Daniel interviewed dozens of candidates for new outreach coordinator positions. He looked for people who reminded him of himself, people who'd faced their own struggles and developed compassion because of it. He hired a former teacher who'd cared for her disabled sister, a retired nurse who'd gone through bankruptcy after her own medical crisis, a young man who'd grown up in foster care and understood what it meant to need help. Training the new coordinators was both challenging and rewarding. Daniel created a program based not on textbooks or theories, but on real experiences. He brought in families they'd helped to share their stories. He taught his team to listen first and fix second. He emphasized dignity, respect, and genuine connection over efficiency and metrics. The most important thing, he told his team during their first training session, is to remember that behind every file, every application, every case number, there's a real person going through the worst time of their life. Treat them the way you'd want someone to treat your mother, your sister, your best friend. One of the new coordinators, a woman named Rita, raised her hand. But what if we can't help them? What if their situation is beyond what the foundation can do? Daniel nodded. It was a good question, one he'd struggled with himself. Then you still show up. You still listen. You still let them know they matter. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is witness someone's pain and say, I see you, I hear you, you're not invisible. That alone can change everything. 6 months after his promotion, Daniel received an email that made his hands shake. It was from a national news network. They'd heard about the Hope Foundation's work and wanted to feature their story on a primetime special about people making a difference in their communities. The interview was scheduled for the following week. A news crew came to the Foundation's office, now expanded to 2 full floors of the building. They filmed Daniel working with families, training his team, meeting with hospital partners. The reporter, a woman who'd been doing this for 20 years, told him she'd covered hundreds of stories, but rarely met someone as genuine as him. How do you stay so grounded? She asked during their sit-down interview. You've gone from mopping floors to running a major foundation in just over a year. That kind of success changes people. Daniel thought about the question carefully. I think the key is remembering where I came from. My mom still lives in that apartment I got for us. I still drive the same beat-up car I had when I was a maintenance worker. And every single day, I meet families who remind me that I'm just one tragedy away from being on the other side of this desk. That keeps me humble. That keeps me focused on what really matters. The interview aired on a Sunday evening, and the response was overwhelming. The Foundation's website crashed from all the traffic. Donation requests came in from all 50 states. Other cities contacted them wanting to start similar programs. And most importantly, thousands of families reached out asking for help. William found Daniel in his office late that Monday night, both of them exhausted from fielding calls and messages all day. You know what this means, don't you? William asked. That we're going to need a bigger office, Daniel joked. It means we've started something that's bigger than both of us now. This foundation, this model of care you've built, it's going to help people long after we're gone, all because you stopped to pray with a stranger. Daniel looked around his office, at the photos on his wall of families they'd helped, at the awards the foundation had received, at the map showing all the cities where they now operated. It still felt surreal sometimes, like he'd wake up and find himself back in his maintenance uniform, mopping hospital floors. "You know what the crazy part is?" Daniel said. "I'm happier now than I ever thought possible. But it's not because of the success or the recognition or any of that. It's because I get to spend every day helping people who are where my family was a year ago. That feeling, knowing you've made someone's impossible situation just a little bit more bearable, that's better than any paycheck or award." William smiled. "That's exactly why this is working, Daniel. You never lost sight of what matters, and that's going to carry us forward into whatever comes next." 3 years after Daniel held a stranger's hand and prayed in a hospital corridor, he stood in the same spot where it all began. St. Mary's Hospital had invited the Hope Foundation to open a permanent office right inside the building, a small space near the emergency department where families could immediately access help during their crisis moments. Daniel ran his hand along the wall as he walked down the familiar hallway. He'd mopped these floors countless times, head down, earbuds in, just trying to get through another shift. Now he walked the same path in a different role, but the memory of who he'd been kept him grounded. "This is perfect," William said, examining the office space the hospital had provided. It was small but welcoming, with comfortable chairs and warm lighting instead of the harsh fluorescence of typical hospital rooms. "Families will be able to walk right in when they need help." "It's surreal being back here," Daniel admitted. 3 years ago, I was cleaning these hallways. Now we're opening an office to help people right where I used to work." William put his hand on Daniel's shoulder. "That's not surreal. That's full circle. That's the universe showing you how far you've come." The Hope Foundation had grown beyond anything they'd imagined. They now operated in 12 states, had helped over 3,000 families, and employed 48 people. But the numbers, as impressive as they were, didn't capture the real story. The real story was in the lives changed, the families kept together, the hope restored when everything seemed lost. Daniel's own life had transformed, too. He'd finished his degree, taking night classes while working full-time. He'd gotten married to his longtime girlfriend, Christina, in a small ceremony where William walked him down the aisle since his father couldn't be there. He'd bought a modest house for himself and helped his mother buy one, too. His sister was in college now, studying to be a nurse, inspired by the work Daniel did. But despite all the success and changes, Daniel made sure to stay connected to the work that mattered most. Every week, he still met with at least 3 families personally, refusing to become just an administrator who'd forgotten what it felt like to sit across from someone whose world was falling apart. The grand opening of the hospital office was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. The hospital administration had planned a small ceremony, inviting local press and community leaders. Daniel wasn't particularly excited about the fanfare, but he understood it would bring attention to the foundation's work and potentially help more families learn about their services. What he didn't know was that William had arranged for some special guests. As Daniel arrived at the hospital that Friday, he saw a crowd gathering near the new office. Hospital staff, foundation employees, reporters with cameras. But then he noticed faces he recognized from the past 3 years. Beverly was there, the single mother with the son who'd had leukemia, now healthy and standing beside his mom. The elderly man whose wife had passed but who'd found community through the foundation's support groups. The teenager who'd been able to graduate high school because they'd helped with his family's bills, now in college on a scholarship. Daniel's throat tightened as he realized what William had done. He'd brought together dozens of the families the Hope Foundation had helped over the years. They were all here, standing together, living proof of what was possible when people chose to care. William stepped up to the microphone set up outside the new office. 3 years ago, my daughter was in a car accident. I sat on a bench in this hospital completely broken, certain I was about to lose her. I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life, and then a young maintenance worker who was late for his shift stopped. He sat beside me, held my hand and prayed with me. That young man is Daniel, and his simple act of compassion changed both our lives forever. The crowd applauded, but William held up his hand to continue. Today, we're opening this office to make sure that no family has to feel as alone as I felt that day. But I want Daniel to understand something. This isn't just about one foundation or one office. It's about a movement of compassion that he started. William gestured to the families gathered around them. Daniel, these people are here because you helped them. But more than that, many of them are now helping others. Beverly volunteers at the Children's Cancer Ward, supporting parents going through what she went through. Anthony runs a support group for people who've lost spouses. Terrence mentors young people from difficult backgrounds, paying forward the help he received. You didn't just help these families. You inspired them to become helpers too. Daniel looked at all the faces staring back at him, and he felt overwhelmed by emotion. He'd never thought about it that way, never considered that his help might inspire others to do the same. He'd just been trying to do his job, to treat people the way he wished someone had treated his family. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he took a moment to gather himself. I don't really know what to say. 3 years ago, I was a completely different person. I was angry about my father's death, stressed about money, worried about the future. I was so focused on my own problems that I almost missed the most important moment of my life. Almost walked right past William without stopping. He paused, looking at the hospital building behind them. But something made me stop that day. Maybe it was my mom's voice in my head, telling me to always help people who are hurting. Maybe it was God. Maybe it was just human decency breaking through my stress and worry. Whatever it was, that decision to stop changed everything. Not just for me, but for everyone standing here today. Daniel's voice grew stronger. Here's what I've learned over the past 3 years. We live in a world that tells us to keep moving, to focus on ourselves, to not get involved in other people's problems. We're all so busy, so stressed, so wrapped up in our own lives. But the truth is, the most important moments happen when we stop, when we pay attention to the person sitting alone on a bench, when we notice the struggle someone's going through. When we choose connection over convenience. He looked directly at the camera filming the ceremony. If you're watching this, I want you to know something. You don't need a foundation or a fancy job title to make a difference. You just need to be willing to stop, to see people, to care. Every single person in this crowd represents what's possible when someone chooses compassion over indifference. And I truly believe that if more of us made that choice, the world would be a completely different place. After the ceremony, Daniel spent 2 hours talking with families, hearing their updates, celebrating their victories, and listening to their ongoing struggles. This was his favorite part of the job, the human connection that reminded him why he did this work. As the crowd began to thin out, a young man approached Daniel nervously. He was wearing a hospital maintenance uniform, the same style Daniel used to wear. He couldn't have been more than 20 years old, with uncertainty in his eyes and a name tag that read, Kevin. Mr. Daniel, can I talk to you for a minute? Of course, and please just call me Daniel. Kevin took a breath. I saw your interview on TV a couple years ago, the one where you talked about being a maintenance worker here and how you helped Mr. William. I'm a maintenance worker too, working here to pay for community college. And I just wanted to say, your story changed how I see my job. I used to think I was just cleaning up after people, like my work didn't matter. But after hearing your story, I started really seeing the people here. The families in the waiting rooms, the patients who look scared, the staff who seem overwhelmed. Kevin pulled something from his pocket. Last week I saw an older woman sitting in the cafeteria crying. She'd been sitting there for hours. Everyone just walked past her, but I thought about your story. So I stopped. I sat with her and just listened. Her husband was in surgery, and she was terrified. I didn't pray with her like you did with Mr. William because I'm not really religious. But I just sat there and let her talk. And when her husband came out of surgery okay, she found me and thanked me. She said I'd made the worst day of her life a little more bearable. Daniel felt tears pricking his eyes. Kevin, that's exactly what this is about. You saw her, you stopped, you cared, that's everything. I was thinking, Kevin continued, his voice gaining confidence. I saw that you're hiring more outreach coordinators. I don't have a degree yet, and I'm sure I'm not qualified, but I wondered if maybe someday when I finish school, I could apply. I want to do what you do. I want to help people the way you helped Mr. William. Daniel pulled out his business card and handed it to Kevin, but then he pulled it back and wrote something on the back. This is my personal cell phone number. I want you to call me next week. We have an internship program for people still in school, people who want to learn this work while they're finishing their education. I think you'd be perfect for it. Kevin's eyes went wide. Really? You'd consider me? Kevin, 3 years ago I was you. I was mopping floors in this hospital trying to get through school, thinking that someone like me couldn't make a real difference. And then one moment changed everything. I'm not going to let you wait 3 years for your moment. If you want to help people, we'll teach you how. And someday, you'll teach someone else, and they'll teach someone else. That's how we change the world, one person at a time. As Kevin walked away, clutching the business card like it was made of gold, William approached Daniel with a knowing smile. Let me guess, you just recruited another coordinator? Maybe. He reminds me of myself 3 years ago. Hungry to make a difference, but not sure how. That's because he's looking at someone who showed him it's possible, William said. You know, when I started this foundation, I thought we'd help families with medical bills. And we have. But what I didn't expect was this ripple effect. You've inspired hundreds of people to be more compassionate, to stop and help, to see the humanity in everyone they meet. That's a legacy that will outlast both of us. Daniel looked at the new office, at the families still lingering and talking, at the hospital where his journey had begun. He thought about his father, wishing he could be here to see this. But somehow, Daniel felt like he was here, like he'd been guiding his son's steps all along. You know what the best part is? Daniel said to William. 3 years ago, I held your hand and prayed because I thought you needed help. I thought I was helping you. But the truth is, you helped me just as much. Maybe more. You saw potential in me that I didn't see in myself. You gave me a chance when I had no qualifications. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. William shook his head. Daniel, I didn't give you anything you didn't already have. The compassion, the empathy, the ability to connect with people, that was all you. I just gave you a platform to do what you were always meant to do. As the sun began to set over the city, Daniel took one last look at the bench where he'd sat with William 3 years ago. That moment had seemed so small at the time, just 15 minutes out of an ordinary day. But those 15 minutes had created waves that just kept spreading, touching more lives than he could count. He pulled out his phone and called his mother. Hey, Mom. I just wanted to tell you something. You were right. That day when I came home and told you about William, about the job offer, you said this was God answering our prayers. You said Dad would be proud. And I just wanted you to know, I feel him here with me today. I feel like everything we went through, all the pain and struggle, it was leading to this moment. His mother's voice cracked with emotion. Oh, baby, your daddy is proud. I know he is. And so am I. You took our pain and turned it into purpose. That's the most beautiful thing anyone can do. As Daniel walked to his car, he passed Kevin, the young maintenance worker, who was heading to start his evening shift. Kevin waved, and Daniel waved back, seeing in him the echo of who he used to be and the promise of who he might become. The hospital doors opened and closed, bringing in new patients, new families, new crises. And Daniel knew that inside that building, in the new office they'd just opened, someone would be there to stop, to listen, to care. to hold a stranger's hand and remind them they're not alone. And maybe, just maybe, that small act of kindness would change someone else's life forever, creating new ripples that would spread far beyond what anyone could imagine. Because that's how it works. One moment of compassion, one decision to stop, one choice to care. That's all it takes to change the world.